Conversations for change, because the world is ready. Today I wanted to talk about something that comes up because of all of the subjects and topics I've been talking about, which are about where we can go from here. So today I want to talk about the power of an open mind, because the power of an open mind is what it takes to begin creating the change that changes the world. And the reason for that is that we cannot contemplate or get to a new paradigm when we are stuck in a place of holding an opinion and position about everything in the world as it exists right now as the starting place. What is an open mind? An open mind is the willingness to consider a new perspective. It's the ability to hold neutrality while considering points of view that may not be entirely congruent with your own. Or another way to put that is it's about coming with a beginner's mind, about saying, I don't know, and I'm open to find out. It's about holding the space of suspended disbelief while you allow new information to come to you, to listen to somebody else's perspective, not from the point of view of compiling your arguments and answers about why they're crazy, what's wrong with their perspective, and all of the flaws and things that you see that you think need to be changed about the way they're looking at it. But literally from the point of view of what if this is a perspective that I've just never considered? What if this perspective that I've never considered, or maybe never considered as valid, is actually worth stopping long enough to reconsider? And when we look out in the world, what we see instead is the opposite of this. We see people attacking each other from opposite ends of a spectrum. We see people having no tolerance for other people's perspectives and assuming that the perspectives the other hold or holds is so detrimental to the well-being of everyone, including ourselves, that it's too frightening to consider. And what I would suggest is there is no perspective that is too frightening to consider, because consideration is just thinking. So there is no time when it is justified for us to stop our brains from working simply because we already have a narrative that may be completely counter to what we're hearing. And I think the reason that's so important to say that way is because we have all gotten in the habit of having opinions. And as everybody knows, opinions are like noses. Everybody has one. But they don't serve us very well when it comes to looking for new ways to recreate the world that we live in such a way that it works and flourishes for everybody here and for all of life. We can't find a path if we're so busy making sure everybody understands what's wrong and bad and dangerous about the paths that we have decided are not safe. First, we actually have to step back from our positions and move into a place where we step into neutrality, where it becomes possible for us to consider that maybe, just maybe, the opinions that we hold on a topic are not the be-all and end-all on the topic. Or maybe they're not even correct. And this is part of the path, I think, of getting to an open mind. Because it's an open mind that we need in order to be able to hear other perspectives. And sometimes we get an open mind through sheer force. We have experiences in our life that are so shocking and jarring to us that they force us to think in a new and different way. And sometimes we come to an open mind because of grace, because some experience comes to us that is so beautiful and so profound that it stops us in our tracks. And it makes us look at the way we have been looking at the world through a new lens, with a different perspective. And often in those cases, we feel some chagrin because we realize we have been in judgment far more than we believed. We have a tendency, most of us, to think of ourselves as being fair and equitable and not judging other people. But the truth is, we're always all in judgment until we begin to see how we are doing that and to unravel it enough to change it. What does it really mean to have an open mind? Well, in some ways, it actually means being willing to consider things that you might have thought were crazy as reasonable. It also might mean stepping back far enough into neutrality that you don't make the judgment call or decision that anything is crazy. And how do you get there? Partly by recognizing the power of the mind and the power of our inner selves and our imagination to create. Because when we understand that we are also creators, then we realize that maybe that thing we're thinking of as crazy is just another perspective from another creator that we haven't yet considered. It's sort of like lucid dreaming. When you first wake up in a dream and you realize you're dreaming, it's a big shock. Oh, I'm dreaming. Sometimes it happens just as the dream is ending and you realize, oh, this experience I've just had was not real. It was a dream. And it gives us a glimpse into our power to create reality in our own experience, in our internal world. Because in the moments before we recognize that it's a dream, we have the experience as if it were real. And sometimes it can even include elements that give us clues, but we don't pick them up in the moment. And in a lot of ways, life is like dreaming. Because our ability to project out through the lens of how we feel and the way we are thinking brings us our experience. And so when we narrow our focus and shut down the ability to accept and consider and allow other possibilities and perspectives and points of view, it doesn't narrow the world. It narrows us. An open mind is the work of coming to the place where we begin to peel back all of the layers of conditioning and thinking that we have built around ourselves throughout our lives. And as I said, sometimes it can be a very jarring experience that causes us to suddenly become aware of how our perspective is shaping our experience and giving us the opportunity to take a new point of view, a new perspective, to open again. But for most of us, as we walk through our lives, we're so focused on our life path, what we're doing, where we're going, the opinions we already hold, that we don't stop long enough to consider just how we are limiting our own experience through our own limited beliefs. Instead, we look out at the world and we get afraid of what we see that we think is threatening our well-being or the potential for us to have well-being. But most of those threats are psychological. They're not real. Most of the time, what we feel threatened by are the opinions of other people that don't match our perspective on the world. And we use that disagreement of perspective as a way to bolster up our point of view. We select carefully the people who we will disagree with. What I'm suggesting is when we learn instead to look for the way forward from a place of neutrality and beginner's mind, then the ideas brought to us by others, even those who we have been trained to see as the enemy or the other side or the bad guys, will give us a new perspective and give us the ability to see things in a way that is not available to us so long as we are already decided, closed, unwilling. Because it's willingness that we need in order to move forward. And the only reason that we have made the choices we have made and adopted this perspective that makes them wrong and us right is because we haven't done the work ourselves to look at that part of ourself that feels inadequate and so needs to step forward and express how right it is about anything. So the work of coming to an open mind is actually the work of maturing the self, of stepping through the slings and arrows of life and finding the path that not only releases the self, but releases everybody else too. And the only way we can do that is if we agree to hold ourselves in a place where we seek for what serves in the highest and best way, with the understanding that we don't know what that is yet. Oh, we might know some pieces of it, the obvious things. We know it's not about blowing up the world. We know it's about uplifting other human beings and nurturing the earth. We know it's about working together to find solutions that change the way we are operating. But there are so many nuances and new answers coming. And right now, in this time when so much truth is coming forward, so much evidence is being revealed about the way things have been operating that show us that the path we have been on is not working. and in fact is so corrupt and so broken and so unable to sustain us, that we have this brilliant opportunity to free ourselves from perspectives and points of view that we have been married to for lifetimes, simply because we never considered any alternative. Simply because we were told in those first foundational years of life that this is how life is. But life is not like anything. Life is the creative expression of the divine energy of Source, or God, or nature, or whatever your word is for that, moving through living beings, and in the case of human beings, moving through the consciousness of living beings and creating new possibilities at every moment. That's what life is. So if we get caught up in arguments about how any way that we have come through on our way to get here is right or wrong or should not, we've missed the point again. We've closed ourselves off to this infinite, myriad realm of potentiality, because we've already decided that those guys are bad, or those guys are good, or this works and that doesn't. But the truth is, every day we live, we are given new opportunities to change our mind about what we have learned in the past. Listening to Osho in his Secrets of the Golden Flower, he spoke about this. And he explained why he could not be consistent. Because consistency requires conformity. And conformity requires a release of being present in the now creative moment. And we've built a world around the idea that we must step into certain kinds of conformity in order to be able to move forward, to progress, to have a civilization, to have a working system. But the truth is, as creative, sovereign beings, we each discover every moment what is the best next action, thought, move, consideration, all of it. And the biggest part of that is that we must be given the freedom to step forward, look at something, consider it completely, openly, and not have the requirement that we decide yes or no as a part of our consideration. Because the moment we're forced into a yes or no, we put ourselves right back on the path where we have to grow through the next experience until we realize that, oh, that yes or that no longer applies. That is the nature of the creative process. It evolves. It becomes something more. But when it's channeled in such a way that it is restricted, it will naturally move to the place to find its freedom again. Because creativity is always seeking the highest and best new way. And that is the power of the open mind. The open mind allows us to change our mind. I remember years ago, decades ago, when I lived in Hawaii, there was a local community group who were running these daily workshops where people would come together and get clarity of consciousness or I forgot the words they used to describe what they said they were doing. But I remember very well the experience of that group because they insisted that once you made an agreement or decision with them, that agreement had to be held for the duration of whatever your experience was with them. No changing your mind. And I remember going to one of their sessions at the behest of a friend who had been pushing and pushing me to go and saying, okay, I'll go. And they had this document at the beginning of the day saying, you're going to stay the whole day. Then you had to sign it. And I didn't want to sign it. And I said, well, I'm going to sign it, but I'm going to tell you, no signature has the power to stop me from changing my mind. And sure enough, we got in there. And the fellow who ran the thing was literally using it as a way to show people, from his perspective, the error in their thinking by way of humiliating them in front of everybody. And I stayed for the first 2 hours as this got progressively worse. And then they called for a break. And I stood up and I said, I'm done. And they said, oh no, you can't be done. You agreed to stay all day. And I said, oh no. I told you I would sign your paper and that my signature would not be capable of preventing me from the freedom to change my mind. And I'm leaving. And I left. And afterwards, I got a lecture from the fellow whose group it was, saying to me that if I had stayed, I could have changed the outcome of the day by being present to be part of the experience. And I said to him that I had no interest in being part of an experience where I had to give up my own freedom of choice and the ability to say yes or no about changing my mind. And I wasn't really that convinced that his community group was actually capable of creating any kind of community change, which he assumed it was. And for a long time afterwards, there were a great many people in that community who shunned me, who didn't speak to me, who acted as if I was the black sheep of the community. And it wasn't until many years later, thinking back about the entire experience, that I recognized what it was about that experience that had so galvanized me. And it was that I was clear about my personal freedom in a way that I still am, and in a way that I believe all living beings are when they get down to it. And that freedom is the freedom to have an opinion and to change it. And the world we live in now seems to think that once you have made up your mind about something, we close the books. It's done. But the truth is, experience gives us the opportunity to change our minds constantly And until we give ourselves the internal freedom to do so, we can't give it to anybody else. An open mind is being willing to be present without judgment and to honor the heart. Because it's the heart that knows. The mind can guide us. The mind can steer us in a direction. But it's the heart that knows. Just as it was that day, my heart that knew that I was not willing to be a witness to humiliation as a public event. The heart knows. And the way we get an open mind is to move into the heart and to allow ourselves to truly listen as if the heart of the person we are listening to matters as much as our own. Then we can't be in the place where we make them the villain. We may not agree with their perspective, but we can feel how they arrived at it. And it gives us the ability to stop judging long enough to actually, perhaps, gain a new perspective. When I look back at my own life and the different perspectives and points of view I've moved through over the decades, I see that it's possible to let go of almost every self-identifier there is in our culture in terms of political leanings, in terms of just about everything. And it happens when we get committed enough to open ourselves to want to be part of the solution that is possible. Because there is no possibility when we are already anchored in to a perspective that demands that we continue doing what we're already doing. And this is why the way forward is through our inner work. Because as we develop an open mind and we give ourselves permission to consider that the opposite opinion to ours has some validity in some way we don't comprehend, we become larger. And that is the task at hand in the world today. To become larger, to operate from the inside out, to wake up, and to stop falling back into old patterns that not only don't serve you, but don't serve the world either.